Okay, hi sisters and brothers. We're back for a video on probably multiple topics and maybe just me talking on things and why I do the things that I do and study the things that I do. Um I don't know what I'm gonna look at. We're just gonna look at a multiple of things that I've been thinking about and asking and understanding. And I understand, I'll get asked questions that just I'll be honest, they're not that important to me to answer, knowing the things that I know now. And having delved as deep as I've delved into the Old Testament and all their gods and how they all relate back to kings' names and all that. And I'll tell you right now, if you go look at all them Old Testament gods, the Moabites gods, the Ammonites gods, you've got Chemosh, you've got Marduk. By the way, if you look up another name, say, how many names did Nimrod go by? What names was he known for or by? Sorry, I can't talk. It'll bring up Marduk. Marduk has one of his names. So then you go to the name of Mordecai, and his name means follower of Marduk. Okay, so who did he follow? Apparently, he followed Nimrod in his theology, which rings true because he was pushing out a little girl out in front to go bad to a king. Because they had basically, from Lamentations understanding, they had murdered the wise women who were your stone, who was your stone, your foundation rejected. We studied all that in old videos. They're old to me now, but they're not to a lot of you. And I get that. I get the desire to want to answer questions and their theological questions having to do with what are considered important questions that we have to answer. And yet, when you get deep enough, the only question that you really got to worry about getting to the heart of begins in Genesis 3:15. And so Genesis 3:15 speaks of the Satan seed against the woman's seed. And when you understand what all those Old Testament gods were really all about, men who were kings who wanted to be worshipped as gods, or who were bringing in the idolization of man as the creator of all things, which was what they were working for, then you understand this cycle of this particular creation and why you have creationists now out there as a front going, no, no, man began 6,000 years ago, right? And so I'll have different questions. People come on, okay, well, when does so and so come on scene? And what does this mean? And blah, 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 blah. And to me, that is what they are. They're just not even worth for me, not to you, because I understand wanting to answer those questions, integral to your understanding that you get them answered, right? Just like mine was to me in the very beginning. And that's going to be your pathway that you have to pull yourself up to. You're going to have to, and I've been looking at this keeps coming back to me, it keeps haunting me. So I have to think it's the spirit bringing it to the forefront. And we'll get back to answering some of those other things because I want to talk about why I see things the way I see them. So this was a question that and I'll fold it back because on the other, I'll kind of answer it myself, but this was what I keep thinking of. You can't, oh my gosh, you can't read that. What have they attained to? They. So what's that question take us back to? Well, to me, and it's my question, obviously, you're not always going to know what I'm talking about. But it takes me back to the book of that's found in the Apocrypha, Second Ezra, and this is one we've studied profusely. Chapter 13. And it's just three sets of verse I'm going to read from the beginning. Thou hast shown, no, it's four verses. From the beginning, thou hast shown thy servant, thy daughters, Israel. You go to, what is it? Isaiah 41, 42, 43. I don't think it's Psalm 41, 42, 43. It's Isaiah 41, 42, 43. It's going to talk about the servant of God. And it's, of course, going to bring in King Cyrus. Well, Cyrus means anointed one. So it's talking about her anointed daughters in the earth who began as what was known as Israel. Now, there's some who wants to go, well, we're the original Israel, we're the original Israel, they're the original Israel, Israel apparently filled the world with her seed. Now, it was her law that the rest of the daughters took out as Israel into the land and began to procreate and create nations. That's kind of the understanding. At some point, man struck her heel and she stumbled, is your understanding, and she lost grasp of her own children that would walk and hearken in her spirit of her law. That's what we understand. Because then we're going to go to Isaiah 54:1. Yet more are the children of the desolate spirit than of she who has a husband. She who has a husband was Baal, the women who fell to the religious lie and worship of Baal, and all these kings who want to be worshipped as God. So God says, you didn't want me, the anointed one, sovereign over the kingdom, who had the authority over the law and still does. You didn't want me, you wanted a king. And she's talking about the pride of man. So that takes us back to the cycle, right? This 6,000-year cycle, and why you got the creationists coming out. We'll talk about it in a minute, but we'll finish this. What have they attained to? What have we, as the reborn daughters and first fruit, and you can maybe throw in sons there. I'm not fully convinced that the sons don't come on side with us daughters. They absolutely have to in the rebirth of a new Adam. But that comes by way of the women birthing the new Adam. You cannot have a new son without the mothers present to do that, which is, we address, may well be the name that is stamped here in our forehead. In a sense, our wisdom is what's stamping it, really. Our understanding is what's stamping that. Emmett, mothers of truth, right? And we discovered the word golem, the term golem. So back to this. So what have they attained to? And why does this keep coming back to me? So it's found in 2nd Ezra, sorry again, chapter 13. It's in a book in the Apocrypha. So it used to be between the Old and New Testament, this Apocrypha did with all of these books that now is removed from our Bibles. So this is where I get attain, the word attain, and it keeps coming to me. So from the beginning, thou hast shown thy servant, the daughter Israel, the anointed one, these wonders, and thou hast deemed me worthy to have my prayer heard by thee. Now show me also the interpretation of this dream. For as I consider it in my mind, alas for those who will be left in those days, and still more, alas for those who are not left. So we're the ones left. We're the ones physically walking in this life until we're no longer left, till we're no longer walking in life. We're dead. We are perhaps on the other side, watching everything as the angels who desire to look into these things. Is that possible? It is. Now, okay, I'll finish reading this because I do this a lot. For those who are not left, okay, let's finish this. For as I consider it in my mind, alas for those who will be left in those days, and still more, alas for those who are not left. For those who are not left, those who are dead on the other side as spirits watching us, will be sad. Why? So this is going to take us to this word attain, because they understand what is reserved for the last days, but cannot attain it. So I said in a prior video that what they had not attained to was a new body. I'm going to change this a little bit, and it may be connected to a new body. But what haven't they attained to that we have attained to, right? And what are we told, particularly as Christians? I can't tell you what they're told in other segments of this religion, but what are we often told? I know we were in the particular churches because I went to more than one. We changed our affiliation in a sense, so it was still under Protestant, from one church that had accused us of things. They actually had accused, and I'll bring it in, my brother. They had accused my brother, who was a member of the church, and we were also members of this church. And when they accused my brother, you understand, my brothers are still very important to me. I speak about the liberation of the true spirit of the women of the righteous daughter, but my brother's liberations matter to me as well. That they come away from this snare, that they come away from this lie. There can be no rebirth of the new Adam unless he chooses to step away from the snare that he's got captured by. So my brother was accused of terrible things, and we won't go into too much personal detail. But in that accusation towards my brother at this time, we chose to leave that particular church. And I think we were right to do so. They were pretty nasty dealings. And we left. And for a long time, we were without a place to go. And I'm not going to say that even though I left this latter church for personal reasons, because by this time I was very mature in my years. When we left the first one, I was still quite young. And I had made the choice, even as young as I was. I don't know how old I would have been. Oh my gosh, it's been so long. Late teens, early 20s, maybe. I don't really know how old I would have been. But it was my choice to leave. And we removed our names off of the roll call. And so for many years, we were without a church to go to. And my mother started going to a local church, one that was right in our little community, and it was a very small community. But we had our own little church. A lot of small communities do around here. And she said, she said to us, she said to my dad, she said, why don't you come? And he went a few times, but my father was never really, into the church after what happened to the prior one. So he was really not about going back to a church. And my brothers were, in their own lives at that time. And one in particular had joined another church. So he wasn't about going to this one. And the other one just, no. And so my mother said, well, why don't you girls come? Me and my sister. And we started going. We did. And I have to say, I liked what I heard there. They had explanations of why things were the way they were. They taught lessons out of the Old Testament, whereas the other church tended to be a sermon around modern day events of what was happening in the world, and then bring in a little bit of a word from, you know, his perspective. And it didn't largely dwell around biblical text, and yet it did, like the way it was structured. It was very, I know this is a word that's getting thrown around a lot. It was very patriarchy in its structure. The old boys run it. And so this one was really no different. It was set up a little differently. But again, it was run by all the boys. All the old boys network ran it. And all the theology was the same. The only thing that was different was it actually taught from the Bible. Every lesson was about the Bible. Now they might bring in a personal issue from time to time and base it around that, but it was always about the Bible. And so from there, I really began to learn things in the Old Testament, particular, that I had never heard before. And it was just like water. I started lapping it up just like water. And my brain started locking in a lot of verses that I may have read myself when I was a child or had been taught in Sunday school, because they really did teach lessons in Sunday schools when I was little, that had just locked in place verses that I was like, gee, what's that about? What's that about? I wonder. And you couldn't forget them. And that was the design of the Holy Spirit. And so we began to go, and I began to learn things that I had never learned, right? So I forget why I brought in the church, but anyway, we left. We ended up leaving it. I left it I left before my mother left and before my sister left. And I left because my understanding had began to grow at that time. And I began to focus on female because they were so hard pressed. This was another trigger that going to this church really triggered that I'm a woman and you never speak of her. The only time you ever speak of her is to bring in Eve and how beguiled and how you women should not be, pursuing other doctrines and you should be listening to us males, 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 males. And that we had to remain silent at all times with a hat on our head covered at all times, because his was the glory that was to shine, right? That was the teaching. Yeah, women must remain silent. If you're going to believe in the doctrine of the modern day Bible women, then you're going to have to take it in the full. And that means you shut your mouth. That's what it means. And that's just what that church taught. The women were not allowed to speak out. When we studied the Bible, the women were not allowed to speak. Your women must remain silent. So if you're going to build up Christ and the church and say that you have a right to speak, you don't. You do not have a right to speak in the churches, not according to the word of man written in the New Testament, and how he's your head, and Jesus is head of the church, even as man is head of the woman or the wife. That takes you back to the Old Testament, Esther. We studied where they got that law from. It was never a law from God. It was a law from man himself and the kings in the Old Testament in the book of Esther. Right? So what are we always told? That this life is a test. That's what we're told. So, what have they attained? What have we attained to who are still living? That they who have died and gone on is watching from the other side did not attain to. What does religion take out for you? When you're believing in a God that's provided for you and made up, and you're taught this, I just love him so much. He's going to come and take us away. He washed us in his blood. He loved us so much. Who cares? He yoked woman and put a yoke on her neck, law upon law upon law, because of this male loving God that loves womankind so much because she was so stupid and begot. You know what it takes out? It takes out your brain. It takes out your thinking. It takes out your reasoning. It takes out your understanding. It takes out wisdom. It takes out your mother. That's what it takes out. So, what did they attain to that they on the other side didn't? The ones that didn't attain to it, the ones that did attain to it, there's this idea of a status when you attain it. So, what's the idea of a status? And we don't like this word really in Christianity because it brings in your ego to some degree, don't it? And yet, without the sense of an ego, you will never stand up. And we don't mean an ego. Ego ain't necessarily a bad thing, though modern day world has taught womankind, particularly, that to have an ego or a sense of self, and that's what we're talking about with ego here, even to a personal degree, when you come right down to examining who you are as a person, it takes a sense of an ego to do that. And without it, you're never going to hit a status. You're not. And so, status is the relative social, professional, or other standing of someone or something. So, what they did not attain to is the status of thought, is what we keep coming back to. So, we're using our brain to reason with. And I believe it's Proverbs 24, it says, call wisdom your sister and understanding your kinswoman. So, who had the word kinswoman for her, the meaning of her name? It was Shira. All right. And Shira means kinswoman or remnant. So, who are we as the ones who attain to this status, actually the descendants of, or the remnant of? And understand Esther's name also means hidden. So, when she got struck, the spirit goes to sleep and she hides herself here until we can attain to our own thinking once again. We can attain to this status, something that those who have gone on before us, who are on the other side now, watch, did not attain to. Though we all have the ability to attain it when we're here, we can all reach this thought process where we go, there's something here not being answered, there's something not being addressed, and it's going to take you on a journey when you do that, especially as a feminine who is told to sit down, shut up, and wear yokes on her neck that he doesn't have to wear. It's going to lead to deep questionings, and those is going to take you on a path, a climb in your understanding and wisdom, and it's going to take us back to Shira. Now, Shira, as our kinswoman, and the one that we are descendant from, with the wisdom of our mother, Emmet, Mothers of Truth, which took us back to the golem and Jewish folklore. Yeah, they tell us a lot of things here. This is a test, and only so many of us is going to attain to it. And we attain to it because we choose to develop, and they don't like it, an ego, a sense of self, a sense of an awareness around us of what's happening, of what's going on, and thinking about things in a deep level that many will not be bothered because they're too busy being in love and taking their brain right out of it. And I'm not saying that that truth also isn't written on your heart. It absolutely is. Theirs is just built on a system of hate that they've been convinced is love, and it's not. The hate shows in the law system of a made up male god who chose to take that in his own hands and relegate her to the one being silenced. And you see her in Isaiah 42. Long time have I held my peace. Long time have I been silent. Long time have I failed to present my case and stand up for myself. And that takes a sense of ego. And we don't like the word ego, but there it is. You're going to have to stand up. That's a status that they did not attain to. Wisdom. Following in the paths of our mother. Call wisdom your sister. And yet, wisdom says in Proverbs 1, she says, when I called with instructions, that means the law. When I call with my law, in the way that it was always supposed to be from the beginning, you couldn't be bothered to listen to anything I had to say. Why? Because his ego outshines anything she has to say. He, and the harlot that bows to it, the Jezebels that bows to the Baal. Go study all of the Old Testament gods. All of them will take you back to a king who either wanted self-aggrandization of man as God, or he bowed to a made-up one that he made up himself and caused the people to bow to this image of a male creator as God and take her out completely. They silenced the true creator in a stone. She says, you denied the rock, and they'll sub in God there, that formed you. That's the potter that you denied, turned everything upside down, told her she had no power over her own children. That means her law. The creation that comes out of her womb is called her creation. As such, she holds the courts and law system over that creation, which is also why the Ancient of Days, and I think this may be, and I don't know for sure, why the earth rang like a bell. Courts in session. Ding! Isn't it a bell that announces courts in session? And the earth rang like a bell. I can't remember what year it rang. She rang. Earth, Mother Earth, rang like bell, and she'll have final say, trust me. Whether we live or die. You can fear man all you want, but Mother Earth's going to have final say over it all, as is the Creator. And she comes in, and we're going to look at all the allegories that were given in the Old Testament. In Daniel 7, she's the Ancient of Days. And because we know that daughter Zion held control over the law, or was supposed to, but because of man's pride, he rejected her. He said, I'm not bowing to her law, even though he took it in covenant and agreed to it. But in pride and in arrogance and ego, he decided he was going to quash hers down and build his own system in place. And that's what he has done. And it began with Nimrod, who is also known as Marduk. And Mordecai's a follower of Marduk. After they took out the wise women who were the real controllers of the law, they wanted them gone. They struck them. We see them disrobing them in Micah 2 from their authority. That's what it comes down to in the allegory. They struck them as if they were men at war. And they were men at war. They were at war with her, the spirit of the original covenant. Her, you denied the creator that writhed in pain to birth you. Deuteronomy 32:18. You can stick father in there all you want. It ain't a father that writhes in pain to birth you. You are without excuse not to understand my Godhead. She's the one that writhes in pain to birth you. No man does. And yet you've got men on the pulpit going, he, go to Isaiah 46, the womb, he carried us all the days of old. He carried us in his womb. Oh, he did he? We did not. She did. Reason. Attain it. Step out of the ditch that they got you down in. Choose to stand up for self, for your own house. And you're going to move on to another status. I think in the next life, you did attain to it because you're willing to think, you're willing to open your eyes. I've often said, it's not on me to open your eyes. It's not on me to make you hear my message. It's not on me to force you to listen. It's on you. And that's why we go back to the questions that are so important to you that you have answered. And I had a commenter come on, and it's so hard for me to explain why these issues aren't so vital. Because when you get far enough in your study, if you continue to travel on this path, that is your path for you, if you choose, you're going to come to these higher elevations. And forgive me for saying that, of understanding. You're going to have enough sense of self, ego, to want to pursue them for yourself. And that's important that you do. And he took that from us when he struck us. He said, he's the creator, he God. And that's all you hear. He God, he. You've been brainwashed from 6,000 years ago, bringing the creationists, right? This is why they hammer, no, it's only 6,000 years. This cycle is only 6,000 years. From the time that he struck her after he agreed to the covenant is only 6,000. There's evidence that we far predate that, and we've been in existence much longer than that. And I said, and I forgot I said it, that our history goes far beyond what's recorded in the very beginning of Adam and Eve. Our creation began way before that. And the telling of that gets told throughout the Bible, and it lets you know that we predated all of that, all of it. There at Adam, he struck her. He dealt treacherously and unfaithful with me there. And it's supposedly God speaking, but it's the spirit of his original covenant, the daughter, the woman, the sister. Call wisdom your sister, and understanding you, Shira, your kinswoman. Okay, so I'm bringing in all of it. So Shira was your kinswoman. She built Uzan Shira. Uzan Shira means, Uzan means listen, Shira means to your kinswoman. She built Upper Beth-horon and Lower Beth-horon. We're told in the Old Testament she built 3 cities. That means she's the architect. The word for architect in some sense is Amon, I believe, or Amar. And she was daily by her side, her mother's side. Wisdom was teaching her how to create. That's the understanding that you come away with. And she got struck. Daily was she in love with man, the creation of man. She loved man, her creation, until he struck her. And she fell. And she gets entrapped and ensnared behind a gate here in this law, is your understanding. So the only one that can open the gate is the key. But that's a degradation of her position, calling her the key of Solomon or the key of David. She was never the key. She got degraded to nothing more than a key when he arose and took her authority. So the mother kind of says, he'll sit on your throne until you decide to stand up and present your own case. The only one who can open the gate is the only one who can ring the bell, right? That's the earth mother. The mother can ring the bell. When that rings, whether you can see her or not, there is a throne of power that seems to be represented as a powerful planet, is your understanding. I can explain some of that, and you can all go, ha, ha, ha. I don't care. I know what I know. And so she comes in and she's hearing us. She's hearing our testimony. She is. She's hearing us, daughter. She's watching what's going on. And as the Ancient of Days, you see what she's in charge of. She's in charge of the law and the court and all of those proceedings. She gives it to whom she chooses. And that in that particular court setting, it goes back to the daughter, to the tower of the daughter of Zion, it says. So she hears her case and she gives it back to her throne. But again, the only one who can open the gate is her when she's got her case ready to be presented. And she's called the key of David, right? That's a degradation of her position. It's a denigration of her power when he arose to her throne and took it. We know he did because of Obadiah 1. He moves amongst the stars. Who does? Satan. Who's that? Man. Nothing more than a man. Who caused the nations to shake, the people to shake? Well, he did. Man did. When he took control of her house and taught a man as God and hell and all of that. When Daniel and his three friends refused to bow to the male idol king wanting to be worshipped as God, there was a threat that he was going to be tossed into the furnace and burned in the Hades fire. Well, that's a Greek contrivance. Sheol never meant that in the original form. Never. That's a Greek contrivance. You're not going to burn. You're going to walk in shame, is what you're going to do, because you couldn't attain to a simple understanding that it's your mother that gives birth to you and is the creator of this kingdom. But you can't attain to it. You know why? Because either one, as a woman, you're taught that you're not allowed to have a sense of self or ego because they took it away from you under the man-made law, stole the host out of your womb, so you'd teach them the lie of man as God. Or a man having too much of an ego and sense of self, real self. No, I'm God. My arm's this all. The power in my arm. Who else would be God? It wouldn't be the power of your mind, would it? That wouldn't be the real power behind the body, the mind. Your sense of self and reasoning. That ain't the real power of this body and your heart, your feelings. Sure, that don't mean nothing. Just flip that off. Oh no, the real power of the body is the arm, the muscle. So says man. However, wisdom says it's this, the ability to reason and understand, which is who shaped the earth and the heavens, wisdom and understanding. And if you don't listen to her, you know what? The end result's going to be destruction in this cycle. We call it a 7,000 year cycle. We seem to get that with the 49, 7 times 7, 49. And then on the 50th, it's a jubilee. So you understand you've got to work this out in allegorical terminology. But also, to the one that this question is important, like how old is, creation? Well, the creationists who are hard bent to tell you 6,000 years because they don't want to believe anything else existed before that. But it did. That little book sealed up is much older. And that comes from wisdom, the creator of everything. And she's also the one sitting on the throne that's going to judge what's going on here. And if the daughters is worthy, if the daughters are going to stand up this time, are you going to stand up this time? There's a sense of a growing opposition that has to happen to the status quo of what man's law has done to us. I don't know if I'm using the term status quo, what the status quo is in the earth, and how we're going to move past that to a better place when we use this and not this. And the beasts that they're bringing in and saying, oh, these females, they might scream and all that, but they want it. I watched an interview. I mean, these animals that come in here and they use their dick to think with. They don't use this because they don't have it. They have this, they have their muscle, and they have that hanging between their legs, and they think they're in a fantasy world. They live in a fantasy world all the time about self, about them. They can't attain this. They're animals, they're dogs. They can't. You come out of that type of thinking and you might be able to attain to it. You might. And so this woman or man, I'm sorry, I don't know if you were a woman or a man. I called you a woman, but you might have been a man. Said that they had discovered a 12,000-year-old statue in Turkey. Well, we know what Turkey is. It's where the 7 churches originated from. It was originally called Constantinople. I can't say it right again when I'm reading it. Constantinople. Right? Yeah. all part of that Roman kingdom that got divided and all that stuff, right? All historical accounts. And then the seven churches comes out of this same location, which is really the seven churches that revolve around Baal. Even when you look at the seven churches, the Nazarites, not Nazarites, what were they called? Yeah, the Nazarites. They go back to worshippers of Baal. That's what a Nazarite did. So God will say in one of the cases, I have this against you. Them there that follows the Nazarites, or I think it's the Nazarites. I don't have my Bible again with me. But yeah, I have that against you. I think it was Nazarites, with the followers of Baal. I have this against the church. You have that false prophetess, the Jezebel. Well, basically, the women in your church just bowing to man as if he's God. We studied the Jezebel, Baal, on the end name. She was raised in a household where her father had the image of Baal right in the household. She was raised right up in it from the time she was a little girl, just like I was, just like you were. We were raised up right in this doctrine and religion that teaches Baal as God, your husband as your head and God, and rule over everything and creator. He don't create nothing but a pile of dung that the flies, Beelzebub, Satan. We were like flies swarming around all this pile of dung out of his backside. False gods. Every one of them go back in the Old Testament. Jesus is the feet of the idol, Greece. They got it standing, really got it up strong and standing. Yeah. The Islamists come in by way. I studied this like 8 years ago. That the Catholic saw a people that they could really harness their power. In effect, putting in full force this idea that man is God, right? We get the Pope. And so we get a nun, is the way the story goes. I've read it multiple times online. So I'm not saying anything that isn't already there for you to go read. And they supposedly sent a nun out to radicalize a people and radicalize the first man, Muhammad, to this idea, this theology, and then developed this image of a male God for them to follow, which then is harnessed to really create all the wars and troubles that really come along. So we see what idolization has caused. We do not see the keeping of God's covenant. And she's largely identified as the presence of God on earth sent from above. Job says, I made a covenant with mine eyes. Why then should I think upon a maid? For what portion God is there from above? She, the spirit. She's from above. And she's the one that you agreed to uphold her law because she's the creator of the creation. As such, because he did what he did and he struck her and he lied about it when he struck her and then led her into heavy deception, God says of these sons, of these men, they are not fit to be in covenant with. And you know it to be true. You have lived it. You have lived their law. We have had to fight to be recognized as equal under the law. And we're still not saw as equal because they've thrown in pornography, prostitution that keeps your image down. They know what they're doing. Figure it out. Start asking some questions and coming up with some different answers than the ones they throw at you. Like, really think about it. Anyway, back to the discovery in Turkey. They found a 12,000-year-old statue. They dated it to 12,000 years old of a naked man. He was 7 feet tall. That's funny, he's 7 feet tall. Right? Because all of the dimensions of the golden king idol in Daniel 2 had the dimensions of 666 in it, which is the diminishing of man. Yeah, it's the diminishing of him when he becomes a beast, like Nebuchadnezzar did and had the entire kingdom cut away from him because he became an animal. He could not pursue higher thinking because he had become a beast, thinking he had made it all and he didn't need her. Well, God says, don't worry, in time we'll take her from you. And you'll have nobody because you don't deserve them. We're talking the righteous. I mean, sometimes I hit these women, they're 10 times worse than the men when it comes to this theology. Oh, harlot, thy wisdom, it has deceived you. It has perverted you. It's all there. But they found this statue of a 7 foot. That's important. 7 feet tall. It was a naked man holding a circumcised, erect penis in his hand. Now, I didn't go delve into it. I'm taking it on face value, what she or he told me. It was 12,000 years old. That substantiates the original spirit of the original covenant, him having a circumcised penis. Because what we allegorized the foreskin meant was that he actually tried to grow a second penis and make a covenant with the harlot spirit. That's what that meant, which was also why Abraham was instructed to cut away the foreskin. It symbolized the covenant with the harlot, which meant that he would end up bound to man as God himself and treat her as nothing more than a womb to bring forth the children. Oh, she gets to bleed. She gets the humility. She gets the suffering. She gets the pain, but baby daddy gets all the glory. He did everything. He created it all. Really? Then I guess you don't need me. And that is exactly what this religion teaches womankind. You are nothing. You are debased. You are nothing more than his womb to do with whatever he pleases. You think that position isn't as important or like so important that God wouldn't give you your own head. That's an important role. It's the most important role because without her, you've got no creation, and he knew it. So we get a turn here of cycles, right? We get that 12,000-year-old statue testifying to a covenant that wisdom spoke about in the Bible. And you have to go find it through your words and allegory. And by the way, when I looked up 417 Strong's Greek, oh, they muddled that one pretty good. You really got to go into the notes now to find the figurative. Whereas I've got it printed off. I'm going to find it too. I have multiple copies of it printed off. 417 Strong's Hebrew, and it says figuratively. It used to say it right there in its meaning. Now you got to dig for it. But right there, it'd say figuratively, it would say false doctrines. I don't think it said empty. I say empty most times, but it would say figuratively means false doctrines. And it came right out and it said it right there, right at the beginning of its meanings. Now they've took it away and they've stuck it in the notes. So you really got to dig for the meaning of wind in your figurative, which meant false doctrines. Right? But you got to dig for it a little bit more. See, so everything they're changing is going to make it harder and harder. If you ain't come to it now, it's going to get harder and harder and harder to come to it, according to what we understand. Because when that spirit comes in and you don't receive her, when she leaves, what did it say? As a bird that cuts through the wind, through the air, you can no longer find its trail, can you? And it's no different with the spirit. When she leaves, her trail is gone. You can no longer find her trail without her. And it's the same with the dove. When the dove cuts through the air, there's no pathway for you to follow. You have to follow right behind it when it's there, right? And that's there in the Bible. You can't find it without her. And so she comes in, according to that, like a thief in the night, right? To steal those who will listen. She does it through daughters like myself, who are standing, who has a sense of self-ego, I guess. Look it up. It means a sense of self. And we're going to have to stand up. They've taught you to be so nice and kind and to never do anything astray, because that's what a nurturing little woman does. She has no sense of self. But the way that you attain that sense of self is through wisdom, your mother. Through wisdom, your sister. She's also the mother. She begins as a sister, but she ends up as your mother. So going back to Shira, it says, listen to Shira, listen to your kinswoman, the remnant, listen to the remnant, because her name also means remnant. We go to Isaiah 22, and it's one of the only, I think it's the only passage, there might be two passages, I can't remember, where the key of David is mentioned. And it's funny, it's in Isaiah 22. And she says, God says, the Spirit says, you denied the creator thereof that fashioned it long ago. And again, I don't have my Bible. Let me go get my Bible. I'm going to pause this and go get my Bible. Okay? Isaiah 22. What does it say? So it says, ye have seen also the breaches of the city of David, that there are many, and ye gathered together the waters of the lower pool. So we discovered that there's only one mention. One time you'll come up with upper and lower. And that's only in the creation of Upper Betharon and Lower Betharon, which was the creation of these three cities, Upper, Lower Betharon, 1 and 2, and Uzan Shira, and that's her. So we get the upper pool here and we get the lower pool. So it's got to be Upper and Lower Betharon. And it says, ye have seen also the breaches of the city of David. The breaches is largely the gateways of the daughter of the wise women, right? And that they are many, and ye gathered together the waters of the lower pool. What's the lower pool identified as? Where all the filth came from. The women would wash the garments in the upper pool. So there had to be some distance between the upper and lower pool. There had to be, which is also where we get, I believe it's Sennacherib, by the circuits of the upper pool, where the women washed the garments in the upper pool, because the women did wash the garments. It meant kept this body clean with the law that proceeded from her house, which is in the upper pool, which is identified as a house in the forest of Lebanon, which is also why we get these like axemen going into the upper house, the women's house, and cutting them down like trees. We get that identified in, is it Isaiah 74? Psalm 74. Yeah, because there's only 66 chapters in Isaiah. I should be able to remember that. So it was Psalm 74, I believe. We can look that up after that. But what does it say? You saw the breaches, the gateways. And we saw when the women come through these gateways that they were as men at war, attacking these women who held the robe. The robe is a symbol of your glory. And they not only removed the glory, they removed the inner garment. They were looking to defile these women, right? Who was where the law come from. And they changed that portion to a harlot portion, and eventually they remove it altogether. And ye have numbered the houses of Jerusalem. We saw them doing that again in Micah chapter 2. We saw King Solomon tearing these houses down, which is why Jeroboam come against him on behalf of the widow woman Zeruiah, who had a house on the wall of Jerusalem. And we saw him as a king. It came upon it was in the power of their hands to do it, to tear these women's houses down. So they began to do it and take control of her law system, which these wise women were in control of. As the key of David is largely how they're identified. But that is she's defiled in that understanding too, you know. But we're so used to hearing key of David, that we think it's a good thing. But it's really a degradation of her status in many ways. To think of her as nothing more than his key, and he has full control of the key. She's the key, and she's the only one that can open it or close it. Right? That's the understanding. So, and ye have numbered the houses of Jerusalem, and the houses have ye broken down to fortify the wall. We get the women mourning the tearing down of these houses. Our houses have rejected us and cast us out in Jeremiah 9. And when you read into the earlier chapters of Jeremiah, before Jeremiah 9, you're going to keep coming up with what they were doing to the daughters, what they were doing to the women. They were working to take full control of their house. That means putting a male idol in here instead of a sense of her mother and who she should be standing for. and the law of her mother. Not his law, which is a violent law and a blood law, which is why your hands are now soaked in blood, going, I'm washed in blood. Yeah, you are. Because you refuse to stand for the mother's law. And as such, she's going to look down, she's going to see that blood, she's not going to hear you. But the bell did ring, didn't it? So she says, we got somebody who can open the door and come out and maybe testify. Am I part of that? Yeah, absolutely. I don't see nobody else standing for this truth. I see there's a full, there's something going on a large scale that many of us daughters has caused because we're starting to stand and understand. And though we think that our power is small, our word is large. It's having an effect, a big effect. And the boys are scared. The boys at the top are scared. The proof and the evidence of them sending in so many immigrants with such a beast law, and they're women just as harsh as they are because they've been brought up being abused under a system that tells them that woman is nothing, and that what they say about white women, I've seen that too. Let's go back to the Western candle. We'll keep reading this in a minute. Let's go back to the Western candle. You have a candelabra of 7 candles on it, but the middle one was said to be the Western candle or the candle of the Lord. At the end of the night, when all the candles had burned low on their oil, right? This Western candle was the one that could light them on fire. Interestingly, it was the women who has fought in the West to have the restoration of equality of women's rights. And it is that Western candle that is going to set the rest on fire for that truth. It's a westernized nations, the spirit awakening to who they are. And if those women wants to stand out in front of these beasts and defend them and act like an animal too, then they can have that too. But they are not going to attain to a higher status. Yeah, they're not. And you understand much of why they're the way they are. But at the same time, there comes a point where you have maybe the power to stand, and if you don't do it, then when will you do it? So, let's go back, and ye have numbered the houses of Jerusalem, and the houses have ye broken down to fortify the wall. Jeremiah gathers the women in Jeremiah 9 and says, weep for yourself because your houses have cast you out. And then they'll say, well, women's got nothing to do with it. Oh, yeah? Right, let's take all womankind away and let's find out what she's got to do with it. She's got a lot to do with it. We made also a ditch between the 2 walls. That would be your upper pool and your lower pool. They made a wall to gather the waters, is what they did, to stop the flow of the upper pool, her water. They wanted to stop her law and her cleaning of the body, of the clothing, right, that we wear. They didn't want it clean, they wanted it filthy. So they gathered all the water in the lower pool. Ye made also a ditch between the 2 walls for the water of the old pool, but ye have not looked unto the maker thereof, neither had respect unto not him, her, Shira, the kinswoman, the remnant. In the future, she becomes the remnant, us daughters that do attain to a higher level of thinking, wisdom. We do decide to open our eyes. We do decide to listen. But we're also called the elect in Romans 11, who do obtain it. We do attain it. We do obtain it. I don't care how many he pronouns they want to put in there. This world is made up of male and female. It is not made up of male and male and male or one male. It is made up of male and female. And those are 2 entities, 2 separate entities. They are. And they represent 2 very different things in this creation. She represents the creator, and she holds control over the court system and the law system, and she is moving out there. She's listening, and earth rang like a bell. It's funny because that's what they used to ring. I don't know if they still do when court comes into session, the bell ringing. And so they had no respect unto her that fashioned it long ago. Call wisdom your sister, and Shira, and call understanding your kinswoman. She had understanding. And the remnant, according to that, she's our original kinswoman because it's her waters that we get the truth from. We go back to those waters in Isaiah 54, 55. She says, come to my waters, they're free. Just believe. You're not washed in blood. Wash the blood off of you, dear daughter. She says in Isaiah 4:4, I'll wash the blood off of my daughters. I'll wash it off. What does blood get washed off with? Blood don't wash you. You're stained in it. And that's what she's telling you. You're stained in a religious lie and you can't seem to come away from it using your brain to do it with. But as long as they've got you trapped in their little trap of Jesus loves you so much and he's coming. No, he ain't. He's an idol. And Jesus, the idol in the New Testament, did not expound on the Old Testament scriptures. You know what he did? Me. It's me. It's all about me. No, it's not. God says, study to show thyself approved. Study to rightly divide the word. That's the Red Sea. And she's talking basically to her daughters who have fell to a religious lie and law system, allowing man to do to her children whatever he wants, which means teaching them his lie, Baal's lie. Man is God and makes all choices and decision, and woman gets to wear the yoke and the blame of it all. Yep, just the way he likes it, all tied up nice and pretty in a neat little bow. No thinking required. But you didn't pass the test. You failed it. You didn't attain to a higher status of thinking. You're not going to move on. And it says it'll be to their great shame because they couldn't think beyond self, I guess, for the males, those who don't attain it. And the women who are willing to play a harlot and hand her children over to this system of lies, this beast system. Um, so yeah, they did not hearken to their maker thereof. Yeah. And in that day did the Lord God of hosts call, and she's the host. She's the Lord of hosts, so the mother of the children. Is largely your understanding. He became a Lord of hosts when he stole the children out of her womb and taught them a lie. And to mourning and to baldness and to girding with sackcloth. So we saw them actually, the women being called to weep for themselves because their houses had cast them out. We get daughter Zion being blasphemed that sat between the cherubims in 2 Kings 19. And she says the children have come to the birth, but there's not strength to deliver. Why? Because the women had turned to this idea of harlotry. Harlotry comes from the idea of idolatry. Idolatry is bowing to an idol. That's what it is. And they had turned from their creator and from their own head. A strange thing is seen in the earth. A woman shall encompass it, says a man. Well, that strange thing was her turning to man as if he was her head and did all of her thinking for her, and not her mother wisdom. Our head is wisdom. And she is allegorized as a dove there burned to an ash heap. Yet it says she will rise again, this dove, and she will be coated in gold and silver. That's right. I'll bring you through the furnace of trials and troubles. That's what we're being tried by. The fire. The fire is allegorized as the law. I found that allegory in the Book of Wisdom, that the fire is allegorized as the law. And that's the law that is trying us women. We are being purified, right? Where we come to the end of it and go, there's something wrong with this law. This is man's law. This is not God's law. And that's what it means, all of that. So I did have other things pulled up, but I think that's good enough. I mean, I babbled long enough. I have talked. I have reasoned long enough. I'm no longer babbling like a harlot that chooses to keep her eyes closed, her ears shoved up, stuffed up with a lie, right? We have went to the waters of our mother. We come from her. And as far as races go, it's not about race. I get so tired of seeing race, race, race. It was never, it's about this. Can you attain to a higher level of thinking? We know Adam pitted us against each other and he's good at it. But historical accounts from the beginning of this cycle, when we go back to the beginning of this cycle, when he struck her and he decided he was taking control of her court system and her law on earth and locked her into a lie, that's going to take her being under that yoke, bearing it, to come away from it and start to climb out of the lie that she's been drugged down into. But he's caused those divisions. But we see historically, in this cycle, all womankind has been bound with great disrespect. And you can go through many countries, you can go through many races, it doesn't matter. We have all been struck, every last single one of us, if we got a brain to recognize it. But with harlot, your wisdom, it has perverted you. You can't come away from it because you refuse to open your eyes. You refuse to use your brain, which is the power of this body, which is also why the Cathars, also why the Templars, when you go to their tombs, they're holding a skull in the stone images. And the Cathars focused on wisdom, 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 wisdom. That's what's going to get you out of the pit, out of the ditch. Reasoning. These men, the only reason why you wouldn't want to reason and use your brain and fall on deception and lies and falsehood is because you think that that's going to get you something. And yet, clearly, in the end, when you come out of this cycle, and you come out of it, you die and you leave it, you're going to be one of these and you're going to go. Because they understand what is reserved for the last day but cannot attain it. You're not going to have attained it. Another chance to move up. And we're all gave that choice to move up and to use this. Everyone, it don't matter when you come into creation, you're gave this opportunity to use this brain to reason with. Some can say, well, it's easier at the end to do that because you gave more information at your fingertips. And while that's true, it also says we also come into more danger when we do that. So there's that impending sense of, oh no, that maybe wasn't over their head at the time. And yet the information wasn't so readily available, but yet they still had the opportunity. So, I say in a prior video, for anybody who maybe pulls this one up before any of those, I say, what didn't they attain to? A new body. And that may be in there. It still may be in play there. But it's the sense of to evolve your mind to a higher status, to a higher position, maybe to move into a new form of this battle. Maybe we get to move into safer ground than you do because you wouldn't attain it. You wouldn't try to. If there's another cycle, another 1,000 years, if we're only in the 6,000 years and there's another 1,000 years to go, what is that particular cycle, gonna look like? Do you want to come back in here and see? It doesn't look very good right now, does it? Or would you sooner maybe move on to a new level of the battle that we're in, and we'll call it a battle loosely? It's about elevating, illuminating your thinking, and why women are saw holding a veil on their face. Her glory, her illumination, her knowledge, her understanding is veiled. It's veiled. And that's why the bride has to put on a veil. Right? They don't want to see her glory. They don't want to see her knowledge. They don't want to see her wisdom. They denied her a long time ago. And But remember, this life is a test. You can pass it. You can move up. Just use your brain, reason. Um, I was going somewhere on the last thought there. Now I forget it. But the Cathars, right? Go look into them. They believed in the Book of Love. It says that's the Song of Songs. And Song of Songs is where most of my studies I ended up. And from Song of Songs, I moved through so much more understanding when I studied Song of Songs and got the allegorical understanding and so much of it. And also why the dreams that I had, you can't say every dream that you have is prophetic understanding for you that you need to understand in some way. But the one where I was called before Mother and the son, and he wasn't sitting on the right hand. Right hand is the daughter of Mother. And that right hand was empty. And I was stooped down so low, I couldn't have been closer to the floor, my head. And it wasn't because of her, it was because of him, because I'd been taught it, right? And I'd been brought before this particular setup. And Mother said to me, because I was half weeping, half bawling, and she said, she looked at me, and I have to laugh at her now because she had to have such a great sense of humor to put up with this kind of behavior, really. And she said, "Dear, what are you weeping for?" And I blathered on something about he died for me and his blood won, blah, 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 blah. But the whole time, I was outside of myself, able to watch everything that was going on inside of the dream. And he was sitting there and he was like disgusted. He wasn't looking for something to debase, somebody to debase, or feel debased, or to feel small. And he acted like he was so dejected. He was like so shut down to me acting like, you know what, a common harlot. And when I woke up from that dream, I recognized that I was to pay attention to his action and to Mother and to what she said. Dear, what are you weeping? And I have that in full remembrance. That keeps coming back to me. That we were being called, and she was determining then who would be her elected, I think. And she wanted to make sure that I bore witness to what he was doing. And he was not looking for an inferior. He wasn't afraid of a sister that was equal. He wasn't. He was showing who he was. And it wasn't a bad thing. It turns out it was a very good thing what he was doing. And I just had to recognize that. And so I was sent back. That's the night I was sent back. I tell of some of the dreams that I've had over the years. And this was one that I must not have been able to find my way back. There's a sense that you can leave your body when you sleep, right? And that I had been called before the throne, but an angel had been bringing me back and the stars were just flying by. There was just these lights flying by like at warp speed. That's how I describe the return of my spirit to my body. And it was an angel that brought me back. And when I woke up, I was laying kind of on my stomach. I never sleep on my stomach. I was on my stomach in this case. And I looked right at the clock and it read 144. That was important at the time for my understanding. And I knew that there was some kind of spirit or entity standing there in the corner. It was the angel who brought me back to my body because I had been called before the throne, and I suspect many had been called at that time. She was calling us out then. And it's those who's ordained to, and I say ordained lightly, but it is there, to attain to it. And it's the mother saying, well, can I birth you all out at once? I can only choose so many at a time to birth out. Can the mother's womb hold all the children at once? Because one of the prophets here in the Apocrypha asks the Lord, why can't it just all happen? Why can't it just be done with? Why can't Earth, come to the full, really fast, fast? I looked at that word too. And I got so many tabs pulled up, and I thought I'd get to some of them, and I haven't. But he says, why can't it come to the full? Like, and the response is, well, can a woman's womb hold? Say a woman has 12 children over a lifetime, poor woman, but 12. And I'm not saying children aren't a blessing. This is not the covenant of God. It's not. This is a husband saying that that's the way it is. It's not the way it is. Anyway, she says, can she hold them all at once in her womb, the whole 12? No. They have to be birthed one at a time. So too, the mother creator. Now that capacity may go up because we're looking at the creator of all. And so we're called and she chooses her elect. We're told that in Romans 11. And the elect at that point in Romans 11, you are so going to come up with the number of 7,000, which is also the number that gets killed in the earthquake. We also are told, though, that for the Church of Philadelphia, which is not brotherhood, we see what the brotherhood done to the sisterhood. Got rid of them. Yeah. That you will be spared from this hour, from this trial. So there's either the earthquake that takes them out to spare them from the trauma that's about to be fold or open to the rest of the population who just laughs and mimics the witnesses and say, ha ha, can't wait till you're gone. And then, baby, it really hits the fan. So, are you saved from that time? I don't know. Is that a made up prophecy? Does it have validity? We have found some of the texts that they relate and kind of write over a prophecy. But we find those prophecies failing miserably when we hold them up to the light and go back into the Old Testament to find their full meaning. Just like Christ. Christ means the anointed one. It don't mean a man. It just means the anointed one. Overcome hell, death, and the grave. When you go back into the Old Testament, we find out what it really meant. And we did a video on that. So if I can find that, maybe I'll post it down below. But it does not mean what the New Testament man's hand is telling you it means. No, it doesn't hold up. It doesn't stand up to the light. It doesn't. You are to try and test these spirits. And we know man took control of the word and the law so that he could write himself as a God and deny her. So basically, that's our video. I got to be done. I've talked long enough. There's enough topics there. If I don't answer questions, it's not because I don't have answers. It's because the spirit's leading me in other directions. And the spirit, if you're listening to the spirit's going to do the same for you. Yeah. And you're going to recognize the validity in some of the questions that they're not as life-threatening for our understanding. When we recognize the full meaning of this verse, sorry, I guess I ain't done. Apologize. Genesis 3:15. Let's go to Genesis 3:15. Who can tell me what happened from beginning to end? This was our test. The only way to get it is dividing the waters, which is allegorized as a Red Sea of admixture, that his admixture of lies come in, covered over our pathways. God says, you did not see my pathways. The waters come over and covered them. Yep, there's a verse there. That's the admixture of lies. That's the blood coming over to cover over her pathway, her birthing canal to birth her children out of the land of idolatry. And then the Lord awakens like one that's been drunk on wine, the admixture of lie in the cup. That Red Sea that you're supposed to part using your brain. That's the power of the body. Wisdom. Call wisdom your sister. And understanding your kinswoman, Shira, but you denied her water. So 3:15. And I will put enmity between thee and the woman. Thee, all this made up red creature on hooves with horns. You see, Ryan Reynolds holding the arm of a woman. He's the man. The devil there is the man, Satan. Isaiah 14. Look at the man who caused all of the nations, the children that come out of her womb, to quake And his religious lies, it's doing it. You're quaking. You're quaking as lies. So we got, and I will put enmity. What's enmity? Deep hate. Let me look it up. Sorry, 342. That's Strong's Hebrew 342. I'm just about done, promise. So 342. It is. I'm already there. So 342 is hostility. Man don't have hostility against us. He can't trust us. When he's the one you never could trust because of his lies out of his mouth. The accuser. Enmity, hatred. It's got a feminine noun. Well, of course it's a feminine noun. But who accused who? It was the man who accused her. And we get her being called out of the earth. We do. In Isaiah 63, she's the one called forth out of the earth. Where is she who placed her spirit upon him? Right? She says that. Isaiah 63. We studied that too. But it means hostility and hatred. It is used to signify acrimony as between the woman and the serpent who is man, the devil. He saw what striking her heel and deceiving her was going to get him, and it was going to get the host out of her womb and him ruling her house, her allotment. Which is also why mother shuts the gate and says, no more allotments to you until you can figure this out. Then she says in Isaiah 42, long time have I held my peace. This is about the controversy of Zion. You denied the outcast. You struck her and you denied her law. And she says, long time have I held my peace. Now will I go forth as a travailing woman. I will destroy and devour at once. Then she says in Psalm 55, you thought I was a man just like you. Now I'm going to set the case in order, Adam. Which is, again, why the earth probably rang. Court's in session, girls. We got to figure this out in the time allotted to us. And I'll put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise her heel, not his heel. The woman's seed is the woman's seed, the women that got struck. And they cut them off from being a nation, a great nation of rulers over their own creation, meaning they had the right to the law. And we get them in Psalm 83. Let us cut them off from being a nation. So then we get cloud of nations. Actually, is allegorized as nations. Cloud means nations. So then the womb begins to produce. Actually, she becomes allegorized as Sheol. You're living in hell. Sheol, the womb of Sheol, who has failed to produce you and produce or birth you, and divide the parting of the Red Sea, which is allegorized as an admixture of lies. Really, in the red cup that you get drunk on, go sleep in, and produce children for his lies. Yeah. So you're basically sacrificing them to this made up god. Moloch, Melech, a king, Marduk, Milcom, Chemosh, Bel. Go study the Old Testament gods. That's your leg up. Go study the kings. It's all there. But you know what? When I was young, and I am going to be done. When I was young, this was daunting. This was a daunting task. And the men had already provided the answers. So I didn't need to go searching and studying the Old Testament, especially. I mean, cut that right off. Just, study your new. You don't really need to study your Old Testament. And yet, how you rightly divide this word is to study it. To study it. That's a daunting task, which may be also why only so few of us attain to it. A higher status of thought. Wisdom is the power of your body. That's the power. It's not the muscle in your arm. It's not the muscle in his arm. It is the power of the mind. That's how you overcome. That's how you overcome. Okay. So thanks for watching. I hope you all have a lovely day. I also get answered this idea of a queen. Um, you know, do you see a queen ruling in the land? Do you see a queen? Do you see a king ruling in the land? It's a spiritual allegory. They may exist out there in the spirit, but here on earth, what's the king that's ruling? Well, the king that's ruling is the Antichrist. That's the king and made up God that's currently ruling in the heart of man and woman to a large degree. So, what's the queen that's ruling? Well, the queen that's currently ruling is the harlot, which again we see he causes the commander of the host to fall because he's exalting the queen, the harlot, which is causing the abomination of desolation, a man inside of a man. So, what queen is ruling? Do you know of a singular queen that is ruling over the entire earth? The queen I see ruling is the harlot spirit. That's what I see ruling. The Antichrist, the king that I see ruling, is man expecting himself to be worshipped and his law because he's king and God. That's what we're understanding, which is also why we see the enmity of his seed against her seed, though both are coming out of her womb. You get it? Use your reasoning, use your deeper understanding. We know that we do move on, and we're going to move up into a higher battle plane somehow. And they're watching on, and they're now that they've moved on, they're still watching us, and they may be watching us because they may have to come back in and do this all over again if there's another cycle. Anyway, so the little book sealed up is wisdom's book, and the daughter gets a hold of that, and she's holding it in her hand. Yeah, that's it's allegorical language as well. Just like I say, when you see Ryan Reynolds with the woman on his arm, and he's all built up in thick clay. It says Adam built himself up with thick clay. Oh, he's causing us to shake and cower, yet Satan, Adam, you are nothing more than a man that caused the nations to shake. My children that I raised up in a religious line law system. Right? Yeah, it's all there. That devil built up in thick red clay. Oh, he's a victim. That red represents blood. His horns, the spirit exalted, right? It's all allegorized. His horns that climbed to her mountain, her throne of power, took her off. Psalm 52, Isaiah 52. Stand up, daughter Zion, take off the yoke off your neck and take back your throne power. Your spirit was a spirit that was to rule, not his and his idea of a harlot that bows to him. Anyway, sorry. Um, hope you're all blessed with a lovely day. Hope you're all blessed with the truth. Hope you continue to search for it in your own way, in the way that the Spirit's leading you to search for it. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. I love you all for being here trying. And again, thanks for watching. Hope you have a nice day.